So the first kind of hard surface detail process I'm going to talk about is using the trim and clip brushes. Here I just have my model loaded in. The actual helmet structure was created through that procedural process of panel loops. Then I went through with the standard brushes, masking, and transpose lines and kind of refined a little details a little bit more. This back part here on the helmet here was actually generated through transpose lines, so I actually took this middle part of the helmet right here and then just duplicated that with the transpose line and rotated it to give me a piece of the helmet that kind of wraps around the back here. So just using the same processes that we went through with on the previous videos. So now if I kind of look at my model here and kind of compare it to the concept over on the side, you can see I still have some areas that could be matching the concept a little bit better. So this kind of part right here is really quite bulbous, and on the actual concept it's actually pretty flat, and it has those kind of optic sensors that are kind of plugged into it. So then you go through and kind of flatten that area out some. So the first thing I'm going to do is just put on solo to make sure it's the only thing kind of visible on my screen here. And then I'm going to open up my brush menu by hitting B, and then I'm going to isolate by the letter T, and then search for the trim curve brush. Now this is going to replace your Control and Shift brush, so just hit OK. And once you have it selected, if you hit Control and Shift on your keyboard, you'll get a trim curve brush as your brush. That's the active one. So now I have the trim curve brush selected. The next thing I want to do is actually turn off perspective. Since we're going to be doing a lot of trims, I want to make sure I'm in an orthographic view. So when I trim, it's actually going to trim evenly on both sides of the model. So I'm going to come over to perspective here and just turn that off. And now I'm going to hold Control and Shift and drag this trim curve line out. Now as you drag this out, you're going to notice that it's very similar to a slice curve. One thing to notice is that the line actually has a shaded side and an unshaded side. Now this shaded side comes into play because any part of the model that falls into that shaded side is actually going to be trimmed away. So as you can see here, the actual left side of the model here on that shaded side, when I release my pen here, is actually going to trim that surface off my model. So I'm just going to release, and you're going to see it's going to make a nice trim right along that edge there. So now if I turn my model back on by just getting out of solo here, you can see I kind of have that plane established now on that device that would sit up here by the actual mandible of the helmet. And this is where those electronics would theoretically kind of sit on the surface there. So I can go through and just start trimming areas of my model like so, just to kind of refine these shapes a little bit more and give them these nice kind of clean hard edges. So I'm just going to come through and refine this part a little more. I'm going to go to solo. Now in this part you'll notice I have some kind of deteriorating meshing happening in the back here. So you can see I have these little bit of holes that were generated because my mesh was very thin when I actually dynameshed the model. And so the two surfaces kind of fused together and they give me kind of this Swiss cheese type effect. Well, the trim curve brush is excellent at kind of cleaning up these kind of areas on your model as well. So I can just come through and hold Control and Shift and just start dragging a trim line out. While you're dragging it out, you can tap Alt and it will let you bend the curve, and then you can also double tap Alt, which will give you a kind of harsher bend. So you can go through and just kind of find the areas you want to trim or cut out like so, and then just release, and it's going to trim anything on that shaded side of that line. So this is really great for kind of going through on your model and trimming up any areas that may be a little bit unsettling or looking a little bit rough. And you can see it's just trimmed that part right off in that model, and now I have an area that I can smooth and kind of sculpt on a little bit better, and it doesn't have that kind of hole type Swiss cheese effect. So you can go through and just clean up various portions of your model like so, just simply just going through the slice and just make sure that shaded line is on the areas you want to trim, and I'll just start cleaning up those edges for you as you just kind of work along. Now I'm going to go through and kind of trim this section here too. So once again, drawing the slice line out, double tapping Alt again, and then double tapping Alt one more time to kind of get that harsh angle like that, and then just letting it go. And it's going to give me this kind of cut right through there on any of those areas that kind of intersect with that mesh. So you can see I've got a flatter surface right there now. And you can start to see how you can quickly go through and just kind of generate these forms on your model just using these kind of trim curve brush here. Now there are a few other things to kind of note when you're actually using this trim curve brush. The first one is that in order to use it, you need to make sure that you have no subdivisions on your model. So this piece here, if I actually try to draw a trim curve line out, it's going to give me an error that says the mesh is composed of multiple subdivisions, and it won't allow me to do that trim. So to get rid of your subdivisions on your mesh, you can go to the Geometry tab here, and you can either do a Delete Lower or do a Redynamesh. So this mesh is already a Dynamesh, so I could literally just Redynamesh by holding Control and clicking off. But in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and do a Delete Lower. And now that's going to give me a model with no subdivisions, and now I can come through and trim like so. Another thing you'll notice is that I have symmetry turned on, but when I did the trim on the actual left side of the model here, it did not go to the other side. So the trim curve brush does not work with symmetry. So the way to kind of get it to work is if you have a symmetrical model, trim the one side, and then go back to your Geometry tab, go down to Modify Topology, and then locate Mirror and Weld. And so by clicking on Mirror and Weld, it's going to take whatever's on the one side of your model and just flip it over to the other side. So now you come through and kind of trim out, these kind of areas like so. And after you have that trim where you want it, just go over and do Mirror and Weld, and it'll update on the other side. Now there's a few other options for this trim brush as well. So if you hit B on your keyboard, isolate by the letter T, you'll see there's a trim circle, a trim lasso, and a trim rectangle. So these are doing the same processes that the actual trim curve is doing, just with a standard shape. So if I select the trim circle brush, it's just going to tell me it's going to be my active selection brush. Just going to hit OK. And now I come to the side, just hold Control and Shift, and it's going to give me this nice kind of circle trim option. So then you come through and kind of place this on your model, and use spacebar to move this around, and you just kind of trim areas out in that circular kind of formation. So another quick way to kind of go through and just trim stuff with this standard kind of shape, and you can start generating some interesting kind of lines and forms on the surface of your model. I'm just going to come through and trim what is ever inside of that circle. So there you go. So I got a nice kind of rounded shape right there. So that's the trim stuff. Now we're going to talk about the clip brushes. So I'm going to hit B on my keyboard and then isolate by the letter C. And you'll notice there are a few clip brushes right here. We have clip circle center, clip curve, and clip rectangle. We're going to go ahead and choose clip curve, and then it's just going to tell me that it's going to be the active selection brush, so I'm just going to hit OK. And now I'm just going to hit solo to kind of isolate this center piece here and rotate to the top like so. Now if I hold Control and Shift, you're going to notice that I have that clip curve brush selected, and I can come through and actually draw this out on my model. Now the first thing you'll notice is this line is very familiar to the same line we were just doing with the actual trim curve brush. Now the clip curve brush has a little different algorithm or process that it actually does. So what it does is when you draw it out, it's going to take anything on the shaded side, any geometry that's on that shaded side of this line, and mash it into that line. So if I draw it out like so on my model and then release, it's going to take all the geometry over here and mash it up to that line. So this is helpful in a lot of cases, but sometimes it can cause issues like this. So literally it just took this entire piece of the geometry here and then mashed it into that line. So it basically just distorted the geo and just kind of clipped it off. So it didn't actually do a trim, it just kind of clipped it. So you would have to go through and kind of clean up this area here on your actual model, or come through with the trim and kind of trim it off. Because right now if you Dynamesh this area right here is going to be very thin, and it's probably going to weld together and give you some of that kind of hole effect that we saw earlier. Now another thing with the actual clip brushes is that they do work with symmetry. So if I come through and just kind of clip one side here, it's going to update on the other side of the model as long as I have symmetry on. So you can come through and kind of go all over the place with these clips, and it's actually going to update on the other side of the model. Now since this is actually pushing the topology, you can often get really kind of great results out of things like this, where if you want to come in and do these harsh cuts like so, the clip brush is actually going to do a lot better job than the trim brush does. So I'm going to undo some of those changes there. And now I'm going to go grab the clip circle brush. So I'm going to hit B, isolate by letter C, and grab this clip circle center brush. I'm just going to ask you if it wants to be default, just hit OK. And now I'm just going to drag this out here. So I'm just going to hold Control and Shift and drag it out. And by default, it's going to give you that white circle. What I want to do is hold Alt and turn that circle into that gray value, and then just release. Now when you release this, you're going to notice that it actually clipped that circle based on the face normal where you started it, and it gave you this very interesting kind of shape. So you can almost see this shape as being an area where you could put a bolt or a rivet or a screw to kind of add more believability to your actual model. So you can just go through and kind of establish these areas, just drawing that circle out and holding Alt, and you just get these really nice kind of rivet areas on your model. So very cool little thing there. And you can actually go through, your entire surface of your model and add these things in. You can start to see, how we can get some of these kind of sensor arrays or other details that we have in our concept created really fast just by using these clip circles. Now this also works with the clip rectangles. If I hit B on my keyboard, isolate by letter C, and grab the clip rectangle brush, you can do the same thing but just holding Alt, and it's going to give you a square instead of a circle. So a little interesting thing there you can actually do with the clip circle and clip square. Another function of the clip tool as well is it allows you to kind of enlarge circles or holes on your model. So if I come back to this head part here in Solo, you can see I just have 2 holes generated. This mesh has been dynameshed a few times, so you can see like these actual edges of these holes here, they're pretty smooth, and I kind of want a little bit harsher. Well, if I go back and select that clip circle center brush again, and then just position my model on the canvas here so it gives me a kind of clear view of that hole. Then just hold Control Shift and drag this kind of circle icon out. I want to make sure that crosshair's in the center of the actual open space, or anywhere in the open space. I don't want it actually in the model, I want it in that open space. And then I'm just going to hold Alt, and what this is going to do, it's going to take the initial surface of that hole and then push it to these new extents around the border. And so as you can see there, after I did that clip, my hole is now extremely kind of precise. I have a nice rough edge, and it's kind of taken all that kind of warp out of the hole there and given me a nice clean hole through there. So you can do this anywhere on your model that actually has something that's already been cut through it. So if you have a Boolean operation or a Dynamesh operation that's already made a hole in the surface of your model, you can easily come in with clip and just drag that circle out and then position where you want, and just turn it to that gray circle by holding Alt, and it's going to re-clip that circle into that new shape. So this is very handy if you do a lot of Dynameshing and you're kind of start losing some of those holes or areas on your model that you want to be extremely precise and clean. You can just go back through and use the clip functionality, and it's going to give you a nice clean hole again, because it's literally just taking that internal geometry of that structure and pushing it out to the extents of that clip circle. So I want to talk about one final functionality with the actual clip brushes. So I'm going to go back to my brush menu here and isolate by letter C and find the clip curve brush. Now with this clip curve brush selected, I'm going to come up and actually change my curve stroke to this. So I'm going to come here and you can see I have the actual clip curve selected, and I'm going to change my stroke to lasso. Now this is not a default clip curve brush, so I took the actual curve one and then just changed the stroke to lasso. And what this allows me to do now is I can draw this kind of lasso out like we did earlier using the masking functions. So this allows me to kind of clip like that. Now with this functionality of this actual lasso, there's another option you can apply to any of the clip brushes called B radius. So if you hold Control and spacebar on your keyboard, you're going to get this little menu that pops up. And one of the buttons here that I want you to notice is this one called B radius. And so B radius works with the actual clip brush and determines how far the clip is actually going to happen based on your brush size. So I'm going to come here and just turn B radius on. And now if I come through and just kind of line my model up like so and draw that lasso out around that port there, you're going to notice that it did a clip, but it left some of the original shape behind. So it basically clipped out that middle portion and then tacked on that end piece there. So if I come through and turn B radius off by holding Control and space and turn it off, and do that same clip, this is without B radius, so you can see I have no inner shape there. And then if I Control and space bar and turn B radius back on and do that same functionality, you're going to see that part right there. And so this offset you're seeing where it actually clipped was just in between those two surfaces, and that is based on your draw size. So right now a draw size of 32 was giving me that kind of indented shape. So if I take this and set it to say a 9 and then redo this clip, you're going to notice I'm getting this really cool lip effect. So this is a way you can add really complex kind of details to the surface of your model and almost look like it's like panels on top of panels. So I can go back out of solo here, and you can see now I have this kind of cut function carved out that's kind of giving me that shape right there. I can go to any part of my model and do the same kind of function with the clip, and you're going to notice it's going to start giving me these kind of nice cut panel lines into it. So with this B radius option, you can come through and just kind of establish very intricate designs on your model that you may not have been able to do without a lot of work. So you can come through and kind of carve interesting shapes like this on the back, and then say if I want to put something there, you start getting these kind of layered effects of geometry across your model. And this works really well for just kind of like carving out areas, like if you want a border for like a soft part to a hard part on the neckline here, you just use this clip brush here with that B radius turned on, and you're already going to get that kind of gap set up. So now you can come through and just scrub out that top one, do a little more sculpting, and you can get that really nice kind of cut line through there. And since this is just using the clip curve brush with that lasso stroke, you're not restricted to, you can do things in symmetry like this, come through and basically just go wild on your model and start generating all these kind of interesting shapes on it. So that's the basics for the trim and clip brushes. We're actually going to use the clips a little bit more coming up here in a second when we talk about some other features on hard surface details.